Welcome to the section on methods and functions. In this section, we're going to get really comfortable with what a method is, how to declare them, and why they're useful. In this video, I'll be talking about how to declare custom methods, and we'll also get into a method with parameters. So let's dive into it. What is a method or a function? Well, some languages call them functions, some languages call them methods, but really they're the same thing. It's interchangeable. A method is an encapsulated piece of code. So for example, start and update, these are methods that are automatically called by Unity. So start is called before the very first frame update, and update is called once every single frame. So the same indentation here, let's go below update, and we can make our own void method. So we could say like public void my awesome method, and parentheses and curly brackets. Methods can be public or private. Private meaning that only this script can access and call this method. Public meaning that other scripts can see and call this method. Like for example, if this was a public my awesome method, like a game manager could see this method and access it and call it if you needed that. For now, I'm going to keep this private, and let's just run some like debug.log. What's up? And then in start, we can actually call that method just by saying my awesome method, initializing it with parentheses, and then ending with a semicolon. So what this is going to do is when start is called, which is automatically called by Unity, it's going to call our method, which will run top to bottom and print out this message. And then just to show you how that works, let's go ahead and put a debug.log before this that says like, I'm about to call the method, and then a debug.log afterwards that says like method called, just so you can see the order of events that this goes. All right, so on my main camera, I have my main script attached, and when I hit play, there we go. In our console, it says, I'm about to call the method, then it says, what's up? And then it says method was called. And it's important for you to know that because this method right here that we created is called void, what void means is it just runs top to bottom. It doesn't return anything, it's void. So one thing that we use methods for is to write clear and concise code. You could put everything in update all at once, but that's not really the best practice. Let's say we have some code for running and moving, shooting projectiles, talking with other NPCs. And these are lots of lines of code. It doesn't really make sense for you to pack it all into update because it can be hard for you to isolate where problems are. So if you have a problem with running and moving, but it's all mixed together, it can be hard for you to know exactly where to troubleshoot. So this is where methods come in. So we would create like a void method for movement and a method for shooting, right? Another method for speaking. And then these methods, instead of having all your code here, the methods would be called like this: movement, shooting, and speaking. That way, if you have issues with a specific feature in your code, you know exactly which method to take a look at for when you're debugging. Another thing that you should know when working with methods is we use something that's called Pascal casing, which means that the first letter of each word is capitalized. Whereas variables, like if I had a variable called like private integer my health, variables use camel casing, where the first word has lowercase and then every word after that, the first letter has an uppercase. Methods use Pascal casing, where it's each word begins with a capital letter. Okay, so now we're going to learn about parameters. So really quickly, I'm going to go back to the basic script of just start and update. So let's say that you'd like to write a program that's going to take in your name, the name of the player, and maybe like in Pokemon, like the name of your rival or something, and then it will print out a message using that information. You can do that with parameters. So we could create a private void called like say hello. And inside these parentheses, you can take in parameters. So if we're taking in a couple names, maybe those parameters are string, and I'll call it like player name. And then if your method takes in more than one parameter, you just separate it by a comma. And the next one will be string rival name. And then maybe what this method does is it sends a message, so debug.log, and maybe it'll use those parameters. So it'd say like rival name plus, and then our message to be like, hey, plus player name plus meet me at the bridge, something like that, right? And now in start, if we call this method, we would say like say hello. And when we open up our parentheses, you can see in our tooltip that it's looking for those two parameters that we just defined. the player name, and the rival name. And now we can just type those in the parentheses when we initialize the method. So I can type in my name as like Anna and my rival name as like, I don't know, Bubbles. And then if we save this and hop into Unity, it's going to call that method. Bubbles, hey Anna, meet me at the bridge. So a method like this would be good for if you had a lot of dialogue in your game where you need to pass in the information about who is speaking and who they're speaking to and populate with the correct names. Let's do another couple examples. So let's say maybe instead of this, let's say that you wanted a method that's like a dungeon opening method that's going to check like if you have enough gems, and if you have enough gems, it'll open the door. And if you don't have enough gems, it'll tell you how many more gems you need, right? So let's say a void open dungeon. And then for our parameters, we're going to take in an integer that's going to be maybe our current gems that we have, and another integer for like required gems, right? So like how many gems it takes to open this specific door. And we're trying to check if we have enough. What we could do is we could say if our current gems is greater than or equal to the required gems, then we could like open the door. Debug.log, let me open the dungeon for ya. And else, if we don't have enough gems, we could calculate how many you do need. So you could store that in a temporary variable and say like int gems needed equals the required gems minus our current gems. And then debug.log, you still need plus gems needed plus gems. And now when we call this method in start, what we can do is we can call open dungeon. And when we open up our parentheses, it's asking for how many gems we currently have and their required gems. So if I put in like, I don't know, let's say I have like 23 gems and the required gems is 25. What it should do is it should calculate how many gems we need based on those parameters and then print out the message that says, hey, you still need 2 more gems. So let's save this and hop into Unity. Okay, and in our console, it says you still need 2 gems. Let's do one more that's maybe even a little bit more game focused. So let's say perhaps you want to write a program, maybe it's like an archery game, and every time you hit something with your arrow, it awards you a certain amount of points, right? So maybe you want a custom method that will take in a parameter for how many points to add. So let's say like void add score, and the parameter that it's going to take in is an integer like points to add, and we would need a variable, so like a private integer for our current score. And what we would say is our current score plus equals points to add. And maybe we'll call this method like when we hit space. So we can say if input.getKeyDown, keycode.space, and call our add score method. If you don't put a parameter in when your method requires one, that's why it'll be underlined in red, because it's saying, hey, you haven't satisfied the conditions of this method. It's looking for how many points do you want to add. So let's say let's add like 30 points. And maybe also in our add score method, let's check if our current score is greater than or equal to 100. And if it is, maybe we'll print out a message that says you won. So debug.log, you won. All right, so let's save this script and test it out real quick. Okay, so our score is also private, so we can't see if it's working until it's going to print out the message that says you won. So I'm hitting space, and that should be 30, 60, 90, 120, and there he goes. It printed out you won because my score was greater than 100. Okay, so that's been an overview of what a method is, how to declare a custom method, how to add parameters. In the next lesson, we're going to get into our challenges. Okay, see you in the next video.